share the paper with you for extra credit?
You just share it with me on Google Drive. All right, start the clock for me. Awesome, rock and roll. Okay, so we left off last class talking about the colonial South. What we're going to look at now today is colonial New England, colonial Mid-Atlantic. So we're looking at societal issues, economy, and then we'll obviously talk a little bit about, religion and the like, because religious freedom is going to play a significant role in these areas. So remember, New Englanders mostly came over in family units, and the overwhelming majority settle or come over to settle in those first 30 to 40 years from remember, Pilgrim 1620, but Puritan 1630 into the Massachusetts Bay Colony through the Massachusetts Bay Company for like 30 to 40 year period, looking at about 11,000 settlers. So we call that the Great Puritan Migration to Massachusetts Bay. And obviously we've already learned about the splintering of, religious and civil unrest in that colony, which leads to the growth of other colonies like Roger Williams leading Rhode Island and Thomas Hooker, Connecticut, etc. So we do see a very common model in all of these, like Athenian style democracy. So if I said to everybody, let's put it to a vote, who wants to go on a field trip instead of taking the test next week, and you throw your arms out of socket, yes, we've practiced Athenian style democracy. And sorry, we are still taking a test, but we will eventually go on a field trip. So a little bit about that style of democracy. It's based around the church. It's based around town meetings. Town meetings become like much like the church, become a cornerstone to life in New England. Their economy is based on a multitude of different economic ventures. Shipbuilding in Boston and in Portsmouth, in Providence, fishing throughout in Cape Cod and off the Grand Bank. They jokingly say that New England was built on cod and God. Lumbering throughout. Lumber was big business, especially for England, for furniture and ships and all types of materials. Small-scale subsistence farming. Don't be fooled. There is a great deal of farming in New England. It's just they have to be crafty on how they're farming. So you're looking at grain, you're looking at rye, you're looking at foodstuffs, corn, livestock farming. You're not looking at cash crop farming like tobacco, rice, indigo, sugar, cotton. Those things aren't going to be grown because they don't have the climate for it or the soil conditions, which obviously go hand in hand. Manufacturing, early on rum production, is a little ironic considering they weren't too keen on their parishioners and people boozing it up, but they like to make money off the rum production. Obviously, textile production later on. We're going to talk about textile production in the early new nation, first industrial revolution. And we already talked a little bit about British textiles and woolen industry, but America really takes off in the textile manufacturing business in the first industrial revolution. We'll get to that in the late 1700s, early 1800s, later in the semester. Puritans are all about that Calvinistic doctrine, strong work ethic, idle hands are the devil's tool, hard work and thrift. There were stiff laws against, breaking anything in the charter, breaking commandments. So no public displays of affection, no adultery. How many people have read or have heard of The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne? Okay, anybody taking American Lit right now? No, you will. I was very fortunate. I had an incredible American Lit teacher in high school and in college, professor in college. And I actually am a fan of Hawthorne. I wouldn't say Scarlet Letter is my favorite Hawthorne work, but I respect it. It is actually based off of a real Puritan woman who was forced to wear a scarlet letter for having an extramarital affair and having a child out of wedlock. Her name was Mary Bailey Beadle. So, some other things about the Puritan Society. They established Harvard in 1636 to educate Puritan clergy. That's the first college. Then remember Yale, established in 1701. It's originally called Collegiate. They're established to educate Congregationalist Puritan ministers as well. That's the third college after William and Mary that was founded in Virginia for Anglican ministers. Again, dissenters are going to splinter out. Maddie did a great job with Ann Hutchinson. Really great research there. We also had Roger Williams, Thomas Hooker, and a number of other people. And I think it's important to talk that Williams is banished, Hutchinson is banished, but Hooker and a lot of other parishioners, they voluntarily leave. Enough is enough. We're going to take our chances, roll the dice, and try to form our own societies. Do keep in mind that we talked about the New England Confederation that was established to try to bring the colonies together. Everybody was a part of that with the exception of Rhode Island. And then the collapse of the Dominion of New England as well. But you get an idea of how New England society worked. It was a society based on religious standing. Here we have Nathaniel Hawthorne, Scarlet Letter. And if you haven't read it yet, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. Be prepared. Here we have Harvard. Again, if you visit Boston, please take part of your day, get on the metro, go out to Cambridge, visit Harvard. It's cool just to walk around the campus, rub the old shoe of John Harvard's statue. That's like a tradition they do there. Kind of a weird piece of Americana. John Harvard's statue, they don't know what John Harvard looked like. So they just kind of went with it. And he looks like sort of a white Puritan minister seated. I'll pull a statue picture up of him later. Yeah, so it's kind of a little interesting piece of Americana. Another cool thing there. Did I already mention the Peabody Museum at Harvard? It's like one of the oldest natural history museums in America. It's pretty sweet. It's worth your time. Very cool. All right, let's talk a little bit about the halfway covenant and the Salem witch trials. So there is a period of time that we're about to learn about, and it's called the First Great Awakening. It's this pious religious movement that gets started in England and makes its way to the Americas. And what you all have to realize is that there are some pretty strict laws that exist in the Puritan society, especially Massachusetts Bay Colony, all the way up to the turn of the century. And that is, in order to be involved in politics, you have to be white, you have to be male, you have to be 21 or over, you have to own land, but you also have to be a member of the church. And being a member of the church doesn't just mean you go to the church, but you're voted into the church and accepted, and you pay taxes. So this made voting pretty difficult. So there are a lot of people that say, I'm out of here, I can't vote, I have no autonomy, I'm good, I'm going to go to Connecticut or New Haven or New Hampshire or Rhode Island or wherever. But after the collapse of the Dominion of New England and the Glorious Revolution, there is this new sort of ability to vote without being a church member, and this leads to the clergy kind of preaching more fire and brimstone. These Jeremiad sermons are like fire and brimstone. Anybody ever heard of Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God by Jonathan Edwards, where he says, you were like a spider dangling over the fires of hell, only to be dropped in. And the road to hell is paved with the skulls of unbaptized children. Super hardcore rhetoric, right? That is some fiery rhetoric. And that's what they were using in these like fire and brimstone sermons, and they'll do so throughout. But interestingly enough, as you can imagine, church membership is continuing to go down. People are moving into other colonies, and they come up with this concept in the 1660s called the halfway covenant. Now, we already know about Calvinistic doctrine, and we know that visible saints are what? Where are they going? They're going to heaven. Because they're what? According to Calvin, they're predestined. Great job. Great work, guys. They're predestined to go to heaven. But this idea of the halfway covenant is, come on into the church. You might be a visible saint. You just don't know it yet. You might work your way to heaven. You do good works. You join the church. You pay your taxes. Come on in. So the idea is to increase church membership and get the congregation rolling again. But we see a massive hiccup occur with the Congregationalist Society in the early 1690s when a group of young girls in Salem Village are going to be a part of a tarot card voodoo ceremony with a slave from Barbados by the name of Tituba. And they come out of this and say that they are possessed by the devil and that they have been bewitched. So they accuse over 100 people of being witches. These people are rounded up, they're jailed, and this set of trials goes on for months in the early 1690s that is really like a kangaroo court, where these girls who are like ages 10 to 14, so we're talking like middle school age kids, and remember middle school, I mean, it wasn't my proudest moments, I don't know about you guys, but they were like acting hysterical and accusing of these people of being witches and flying and possessing people in the community. And a significant number of these accused are going to end up executed. 19 are going to be hanged. One will be pressed to death. John Proctor. Anybody ever read or seen The Crucible before? You will read or see that eventually in American Lit. And do you know what pressed to death is? You just have stones stacked onto you until you suffocate. And your like ribs are crushed and your organs, you can't breathe anymore. 2 dogs are executed in the witch trials. Remember that the witch trials are not a new thing. They date all the way back to the 1400s in England. Somebody brought up Monty Python yesterday about the test to see if the witch was a witch, the floating test, and burning at the stake and all that, obviously.
Oh, the drowning test.
Yeah.
If the witch just chain them to a chair, throw them in the lake, if they throw it up there, a witch kill them, if they did, they drown.
Yeah, so they're going to drown either way, they're going to burn either way, death is inevitable for any accused witch. So the reason I bring up the kangaroo court issue, is that it's kind of like if you were willing to admit that you were a witch, which this happened, they would just banish you. It's like, oh, you're a witch, you're banished. All right? So life looks a little different in the 1690s than it did 60 years prior. So you might have an opportunity to maybe make it somewhere else. But a lot of these people that are like, Goody Proctor and others that are like, no, I'm not a witch. All right, well, sorry. These girls say you are. They're passing out of hysteria, screaming in the courtroom. You know what? You're going to get executed. So the witch trial is really wild. And I'm going to show you guys a clip. It's pretty interesting. Has anybody ever heard of the arrogant theory? All right, cool. You all familiar with that? What that is? It's like a food poisoning that creates hallucinations. So this is like a theory: were these girls just tripping? Right? Were they just hallucinating? Like literally tripping? Like not literally tripping, tripping. You know what I'm saying?
LSD is derived from the fungus or that grows on the barley. So they link that.
You're exact. Yeah, good point, Connor. Yeah, right. So, so the witch hysteria obviously came to a conclusion in 1693, but this goes on from 1691 to 1693. This is crazy. So we got the witch trials. This is, you see one of the girls that is accusing this woman of being a witch. She's passed out on the floor. The final straw was when the colonial governor of Massachusetts Bay was accused. His wife was accused of being a witch, and then they're like, we're shutting it down. Plus, there's another economic factor here. If you have over 100 people jailed, what issue is that going to cause? It's going to cost a lot of money to take care of these prisoners, right? So all these folks are released. There's really no major implications for these girls who accuse these people of being witches. That leads to the death of 20 people and 2 poor dogs. All right, so how am I doing time-wise?
About 10 minutes.
Beautiful. All right, so life in the Middle Atlantic, the middle colonies. You'll probably note that I put Maryland in here as well. I think Maryland kind of falls into that line. Is they are middle, but they all are southern because they've got a southern agricultural system. They're using a slave-based system as well. So it's kind of like we gotta pull them into both lessons. All right. Remember that there's a lot of shipbuilding, commercial port centers at New York, Philadelphia, and later Baltimore. Okay. We also have a slave-based system here. We've got tobacco coming out of the Chesapeake region of Delaware and Maryland. Middle colonies are going to have a growing middle class, but a great deal of religious autonomy. Quakers in Pennsylvania, Jews, French Huguenots, that's a Calvinist group moving into New York, Presbyterians, another Calvinist group coming out of Scotland, and Ulster, Ireland. Basically, these Scottish Presbyterians make their way from Scotland. They're persecuted there to go to Ulster, Ireland. They're going to intermarry with the Irish. But we know at this period of time, what's the main religion of Ireland? Still is Catholic, right? So they're going to, how many people have any Scots-Irish roots in here? Okay, these people are going to take all the possessions they can carry, get on merchant ships, and cross the Atlantic to settle in places like New Jersey, Western Pennsylvania, and the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And then we've got, an easy way to remember the Presbyterians in New Jersey, they're going to establish a very prestigious college to educate their clergy. Does anybody know what that school is? Princeton. Very good. Who said that?
I was joking.
No, you were right. Good job, Cody. It is Princeton. Well done. One very famous alumnus that you can easily remember, he went there to join the clergy and he came back with a law degree. His name's James Madison. So, yeah, he was a Scots-Irish Presbyterian. All right, so we got more flexible social structures, a growing middle class, which I already mentioned, skilled artisans, entrepreneurs, small business owners, small farms, a lot of grain. They were the breadbasket of the colonies. Okay? Rural life in colonial America existed everywhere. Like 85 to 90% of people living in colonial America at the dawn of the Revolution lived in rural society. Okay? They were not in large urban centers. We're just not there yet. Okay? We'll talk about the growth of urban centers as we get into the new nation. Really, your only major urban centers at this period of time are New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Charlestown, Charleston, South Carolina, and then we could make an argument for Norfolk, we can make an argument for Williamsburg, we can make an argument for Baltimore, we can make an argument for Portsmouth, we can make an argument for Providence. And those are your commercial centers or your urbane centers. Okay? That's what life looked like for most people. You were in a log cabin or a cottage carving out a life in the back country of colonial America. Talk a little bit about the Scots-Irish. The Scots-Irish made up about 7% of the colonial population at the dawn of the Revolution, 1775. Most were pioneers, so about 175,000. Most were Presbyterian pioneers that carved their way into valleys like the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania and the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. In fact, there's a cultural Scots-Irish, German, English saying in the Shenandoah Valley that I don't know if you all have ever heard of. The Shenandoah Valley looks a lot like the Scottish Highlands, and it looks a whole lot like the Rhine Valley of Germany. When these folks came into the valley, when they were going south, elevation-wise, and you all have been on Interstate 81, right? Yeah? Anybody gone out to Roanoke or gone up to Harrisonburg before? Well, when they were going south and that elevation was going up, they said, hey, we're going up the valley. And then when they were going north, they were going down in elevation, so they were saying, we're going down the valley. So even to this day, that's kind of stuck. When you're going up the valley, you're going south. When you're going down the valley, you're going north. So I just wanted to share that. It's actually, that's where I'm from, over in that area. How do they make their money? Fishing, hunting, trading, fur trading, trapping, and obviously there's going to be relations that they have to have with Native Americans. As Daniel explained to us, not all of these relations are good. We already learned about the North Carolina regulator movement before. Who researched that? Anybody? We also have the Paxton Boys. This vigilante group rose up and killed 21 Conestoga Susquehanna Indians just outside Philadelphia in a massacre in 1763 as a result of an attack in the Lehigh Valley. Similarly, we learned about the Carolina regulator movement against the Tuscarora in a previous lesson. There's the Paxton Boy Conestoga Massacre, where the Conestoga were massacred at the hands of this vigilante group, further dividing the relations between them and the Quakers. This is like one of those seedlings of revolution. How am I doing on time? Am I good? Sweet. All right, we're going to wrap things up today with the mingling of races. Hang tight. About 6% of the population were, at the dawn of the Revolution, were German settlers, about 150,000. Most were Protestant, primarily Lutheran. The Pennsylvania Dutch are not Dutch. They are Deutsch, the Pennsylvania Germans. Okay? 5% were multicultural. French Huguenots, Welsh, Dutch, Swedes, Jews, Irish, Swiss, Finns. And about 30% of the population, African indentured servants, African chattel slaves, and or free blacks. This is a melting pot of mixed people at the dawn of the Revolution. And I will leave you with this today. This is the colonial American melting pot. Everything here in pink, this is just 15 years before the Revolution, is English. And the green, Dutch. That's the old New Amsterdam, New Netherlands region. Out here, German, from the Lehigh Valley down into the Shenandoah Valley. Out here in the back country and in the Shenandoah Valley and down here in Appalachia, Scots-Irish, and along with the English here in the Tidewater and the coastal lowlands, African settlers as well. These people, many of which coming voluntarily or involuntarily. You guys have any questions for me? Fantastic. Thanks so much. Good job today, guys. Yeah.